Chapter 8 of the surprising adventures of Bampfylde Moore Carew, King of the Beggars, by Bampfylde Moore Carew. This recording is in the public domain. It was not long after this that, being in the city of Bristol, he put in execution a very bold and ingenious stratagem, calling to mind one Aaron Cook, a trader of considerable worth and note, at St. John's in Newfoundland, whom he resembled both in person and speech. He resolved to be the son of Aaron Cook for some time. He therefore went upon the Tolsey and other places of public resort for the merchants of Bristol, and there modestly acquainted them with his name as well as his misfortunes, that he was born and lived all his life at St. John's in Newfoundland, that he was bound for England in the Nicholas, Captain Newman, which vessel springing a leak, they were obliged to quit her, and were taken up by an Irishman, Patrick Poore, and by him carried into Waterford, whence he had got passage and landed at King's Road; that his business in England was to buy provisions and fishing craft, and to see his relations, who lived in the parish of Cockington, near Torbay, where he said his father was born. Captains Elton, Galloway, Masters, Thomas, Turner, and several other Newfoundland traders, many of whom personally knew his pretended father and mother, asked him many questions about the family, their usual place of fishing, etc., particularly if he remembered how the quarrel happened at his father's when he was but a boy, which was of so unhappy a consequence to Governor Collins. Mr. Carew very readily replied that though he was then very young, he remembered that the governor, the parson, and his wife, Madam Short, Madam Bengy, Madam Brown, and several other women of St. John's, having met together and feasting at his father's, a warm dispute happened among the men in the heat of liquor, concerning the virtue of women, the governor obstinately averring that there was not one honest woman in all Newfoundland. What think you then of my wife? Said the parson. The same as I do of all other women, all whores alike, answered the governor roughly. Hereupon the women, not able to bear this gross aspersion on their honour, with one accord attacked the governor, who being overpowered by their fury could not defend his face from being disfigured by their nails, nor his clothes from being torn off his back. And what was much worse, the parson's wife, thinking herself most injured, cut the hamstring of his leg with a knife, which rendered him a cripple his whole life after. This circumstantial account, which was in every point exactly as the affair happened, and many other questions concerning the family which the captains asked him, and he as readily answered, having got every particular information concerning them when in Newfoundland, fully convinced them that he must really be the son of their good old friend Mr. Aaron Cook. They therefore not only very generously relieved him, but offered to lend him any moderate sum, to be paid again in Newfoundland the next fishing season. But Mr. Carew had too high a sense of honour to abuse their generosity so far. He therefore excused himself from accepting their offer, by saying he would be furnished with as much as he should have occasion for, by merchant Pem of Exeter. They then took him with them to Guildhall, recommending him to the benevolence of the mayor and corporation, testifying he was a man of reputable family in Newfoundland. Here a very handsome collection was made for him, and the circumstances of his misfortunes becoming public, many other respectable ladies and gentlemen gave him that assistance according to their abilities, which is always due to unfortunate strangers. 3 days did the captains detain him by their civilities in Bristol, showing him all the curiosities and pleasures of the place to divert his melancholy. He then set out for Cockington, where his relations lived, and Bridgewater being on his road, he had a letter from one of the Bristol captains to Captain Drake in that place. As soon as he came to Bridgewater, he went directly to the mayor's house, and knocking at the gate, it was opened to him by Madam Mayoress, to whom he related his misfortune, and the good lady, pitying him as an unfortunate stranger, so far distant from his home, gave him half a crown, and engaged her daughter, a child, to give him a shilling. We cannot pass by this amiable lady without paying her the due tribute of praise. for tenderness and compassion ought to be the peculiar ornament of every female breast, and it were to be wished that every parent would betimes, like this good lady, instil into their children a tender sense of humanity and feeling for another's woes. They would by this means teach them the enjoyment of the most godlike and pleasing of all other pleasures, that of relieving the distressed, and would extinguish that sordid, selfish spirit which is the blot of humanity. The good lady, not content with what she had already done, ushered him into the room where her husband, an aged gentleman, was writing, to whom she related Mr. Cook's misfortunes in as moving a manner as she was able. The old gentleman laid aside his spectacles, and asked him several questions, then dispatched his servant into the town, who soon returned with two Newfoundland captains, one of whom happened to be Captain Drake, to whom our hero had a letter of recommendation given him by one of the Bristol captains, and the other Captain Morris, whose business having called him to Bristol, he had there been already informed by the captains of the circumstances of Mr. Cook's misfortunes, and he repeating the same now to the mayor, Captain Morris confirmed this relation, told them how he had been treated at Bristol, and made him a present of a guinea and a greatcoat, it being then very rainy weather. Captain Drake likewise gave him a guinea, for both these gentlemen perfectly well knew Mr. Cook's father and mother. The mayor likewise made him a present, and entertained him very hospitably in his house. In the same character he visited Sir Haswell Tent and several other gentlemen, raising considerable contributions. This activity and ingenuity of their new king was highly agreeable to the community of the mendicants, and his applauses resounded at all their meetings. But as fortune delights to change the scene, and of a sudden to depress those she had most favoured, we come now to relate the misfortunes of our hero, though we know not whether we should call them by that name or not, as they gave him a large field of action, and greater opportunities of exercising the more manly virtues, courage and intrepidity in dangers. Going one day to pay a visit to Mr. Robert Incledon, at Barnstable in Devon, in an ill hour which his knowledge could not foresee, knocking at the door softly, it was opened to him by the clerk, with the common salutation of "How do you do, Mr. Carew? Where have you been?" He readily replied that he was making a visit to Squire Basser, and in his return had called to pay his respects to Mr. Incledon. The clerk very civilly asked him to walk in, but no sooner had he entered than the door was shut upon him by Justice Leithbridge, a very bitter enemy to the whole community of mendicants, who concealed himself behind it, and Mr. Carew was made a prisoner. So sudden are the vicissitudes of life, and misfortunes spring, as it were, out of the earth. Thus suddenly and unexpectedly fell the mighty Caesar, the master of the world, and just so affrighted Priam looked when the shade of Hector drew his curtains and told him that his Troy was taken. The reader will undoubtedly be at a loss to comprehend why he was thus seized upon, contrary to the laws of hospitality. It is therefore our business to inform him, that he had some time before this, in the shape of a poor lame cripple, frightened either the justice or his horse on Hilton Bridge, but which of the two it was cannot be affirmed with any certainty. However, the justice vowed a dire revenge, and now exulted greatly at having got him in his power. Fame had no sooner sounded with her 100 prattling tongues that our hero was in captivity, but the justice's house was crowded with intercessors for him. However, Justice Leithbridge was deaf to all, and even to the entreaties of beauty, several ladies being likewise advocates for him. Whether it was that the justice was past that age when love shoots his darts with most success, or whether his heart was always made of that unmalleable stuff which is quite unassailable by love, or by his cousin german pity, we cannot well determine. Amongst the rest who came to see him were some captains of collier vessels, whom the justice espying, very probably taking some disgust at their countenances, demanded who they were, and immediately discharging the guard which had been placed over Mr. Carew, charged the captains with the care of him, though they affirmed their vessels were to sail the next tide. However, the justice paying as little regard to their allegations as he had done to their petitions for Mr. Carew, they found they had no other hope but from the good natured dame Patience, a good woman, who is always ready to render our misfortunes less, and was, in all his adventures, a great friend to our hero. Chapter 9.